Rick Bragg. Rick Bragg was born on July 26, 1959, in Piedmont, Alabama. He grew up in a community of Possum Trot near Jacksonville. He credits most of his writing abilities to the stories he heard from his family. He was raised mostly by his mother. His father abandoned their family when Bragg was young. Other family members were greatly involved in his life. This helped him grow physically and emotionally. Bragg worked for several newspapers such as the New York Times and the Jacksonville Star. He covered murders and the unrest in Haiti as a Metro reporter, then wrote about the Oklahoma City bombing and the Jacksonville borough killings. His most famous book, All Over But the Shoutin', tells the story of Bragg's childhood in Alabama, his rise to become the notable journalist, his personal struggles, and the stories of the people he cares about. The book pays a special attention to his struggles with his abusive, alcoholic father and the story of his mother who raised Bragg and his two brothers on her own. Rick Bragg is a national best-selling author and is known for his way of pulling his readers' heartstrings and pulling them straight into his books. Most of his books always deal with poor people. Growing up, he knew what it was like to grow up poor. He grew up in rural Alabama when the main topic everyone was talking about was race. Rick Bragg deals with social classes because he understands the poor side of social class and the richer side of social class. In All Over But the Shoutin', we learn about a young Rick Bragg who learned at a young age that money was everything. Rick Bragg first started to notice his low social status when he started school. Rick Bragg says in his book, All Over But the Shoutin', but in the first grade was divided into a rigid castle system by the ancient teacher. In this classroom, the teacher divided all the families of the wealthy and prestige on one side of the room, the kids that were not rich but were not poor either in the middle of the room, and finally the poor kids on the very far side of the room. Rick Bragg was extremely bright for his social class. In his book, he talks about how the teacher asked him to come and read with the Cardinals, the upper class students, one day, but after that day, he remembers the teacher, and I will always remember, told me this: I would be much more comfortable with my own kind. I was 6, but even at 6, you know what it means to be told you're not good enough. While Rick Bragg may have grown up knowing he was poor, he was never ashamed of it. As he writes, I brought my girlfriends home, and if I saw that look, that horror in their eyes, I took them back to their houses and never came back at all. Rick Bragg always dated well-off girls. They showed him a world that one day would be a part of, but he was in no way ashamed of where he was now. Being poor is a condition, and anytime you get something that is worth it, so important to you, you have to fight for it because you never know who will take it. Here he states, it is a common condition of being poor. You are always afraid that the good things in life are temporary, that someone can take them away because you have no power beyond your own brute strength to stop them. Being in the lower class involves a lot of brute work. Rick Bragg grew up knowing this because, as you read in his book, he worked all of the summers on his uncle's farm. He worked for 2 summers just to pay for a car that he later wrecked 2 weeks later. In his book, he states, I worked 2 summers in hell and here at minimum wage to earn enough money to buy her. Rick Bragg understands how hard lower-class citizens have to work. Lower-class citizens should not be looked down upon just because of how poor they are. They work hard and live in a world where working is just about all of that thing you know.
That's the backbone of the books. It's very nice to have people talk about your writing. It's very nice to have them pat you on your big old round head and tell you that there's some talent in there. But the truth is, the backbone of these books are now and will always be class. Will be a struggle that people endure to make life a little better for the people around them. And I think that's why y'all are here tonight. There are a lot of other things that enter into it too. Let's try another little experiment. How many, and just the ladies, please. How many of you, well, I don't care, the men can raise their hand if you want to, but how many of you are married to a good man? How many of you are lying? When we did the first book, when we did All Over But the Shouting, I did it as a love story for my mother. It wasn't any more complicated than that. I wanted to honor her for going 18 years without a new dress so that I would have school clothes. I wanted to thank her for taking in laundry and taking in ironing. And that's all really that book was intended to do. But I knew that to show how bright my mother's light was in my life, I needed to show the darkness that had forced her to be that way. And I didn't want to whine about it because, gosh almighty, you can be like sitting watching daytime TV. When I do play hooky, sometimes I do. And you'll be flicking through and there's somebody, and they're, God almighty, there's, I didn't want to whine. And so I wanted to paint people a picture, to try to paint them a picture of why my mother's sacrifice was necessary. And my mother's sacrifice was necessary because she married for love.